Africa Prime, brought to you by Jameson's Select Reserve.
Good evening, you're watching Africa Prime. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. Now today, December 6th, the new age is turning 1 year. It's 1 year since the first print rolled off the printing presses and they entered the South African newspaper industry. Now to help us take stock and look at what has happened in the past year is the CEO, Nazeem Howa. Nazeem, thanks very much indeed for finding time to come and chat to us.
Thanks, Godfrey, and thanks for having us today.
Give us a summary, Nazeem. How has it been?
You know, when I speak to friends and colleagues, I describe the year at New Age much like a roller coaster ride, going to the Gold Reef City and getting on the wildest ride. But it's been a wild ride, but fun at the same time. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Sure. Give us some numbers. How many do you send out every day? How many come back? How many are sold? What market share have you been able to grab?
Godfrey, we followed the example of our strategic shareholder, the Times of India. So we have a hybrid model.
Sure.
We sell some copies at R3.50, we sell some at R2, and then we have some copies that are free. Between the three, we print 100,000 every day, and we distribute 100,000 copies every day. The aim of the exercise at the end of the day is to ensure that we have a good return for the investment of our advertisers.
Sure.
The Times of India message is make sure your advertisers get response no matter how you get the papers into the hands of the public. And that's what we've done.
Right. So when you look back in terms of the targets that you guys originally set out, how many have been met? How many have not been met?
On the numbers, I think we're quite comfortable. I think we'll meet the business plan for this year. I think we've set a very aggressive business plan. It was based really on the trends followed by other new launches such as This Day, Nova and The Times. We're ahead of the curve on all of those lines. So we're very comfortable with where we're at the moment.
Yeah.
Our view is that in the next 2 or 3 months we'll do even better. And we expect to end our financial year at the end of February with a very good result.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you're profitable yet.
In the month of November, we turned a small profit. Our expectation is that we'll be fully profitable by June or July next year.
Yeah. So 300K distribution, was that your original target?
That was always the original target. It was 100,000 was the original target. Put 100,000 copies out into the market every day.
Okay. But that includes those you are giving out and those that you're selling at the different prices. So for comparative purposes, if we were to compare you, say, against one of your main competitors, which would be the Star, where would you say you stand in respect to what you originally set out to do?
We remain much smaller than them, but they've been around for 120 odd years.
Sure.
In our market now, we're probably the size of Mail and Guardian in Business Day in terms of sold for copies. But we were then bolstered with the free copies to get a good return for our advertisers. Sorry.
Sure. When we look, of course, from outside, we look at what we see in the paper physically, and we see a lot of editorial versus the advertising spend. In terms of that ratio, what was the original target? Where are you standing now, and where do you want it to go?
From an advertising spend, November we've turned a profit, which means that we've hit our advertising targets. December bookings, we were sitting at 80% of the book at the start of December. We'll beat the December target as well from an advertising ratio. I think the good fun for me is we started out with our editorial colleagues complaining about the lack of advertising. They're now complaining about too much advertising. So we're very comfortable with where we sit with them. I think the great thing for us in advertising is that we've now seen two retailers enter the paper. The first one was Game, who've just signed a second contract with us. On Friday, coming Friday, we'll see Spa enter the market. And then we'll have a third retailer entering in the next week or so. The difficulty is they all want the same space, but that's another very good problem to have. We enjoy the problems of that nature.
Right. And in terms of your target for next year?
Next year we'll do the budgets in January. We've got a strategic workshop on Friday to start planning it. But we're planning to break even from June, July onwards and remain in the black after that.
Yeah. Would you say if you were sitting at independent newspapers and you were able to in some way to communicate a message to them, you should say, be very afraid, we are coming next year, we're coming after your market share?
We've got very humble ambitions. So I think we're the ant in the big market. So I think there's enough for all of us to forage off. Yeah. I think we offer a different offering to people. I think two buzzwords are often used in our operation. One is innovation, one is differentiation. And when we put the two together, we make a compelling argument to advertisers, and for that reason we're seeing big brands coming into the paper way ahead of of the kind of plan we had set for them.
Yeah. How difficult has it been to get advertising in this market? I would imagine it must be very difficult, particularly given the state of the economy that we have seen. We have seen the economy under pressure, economic activity declining.
It's been very, very tough. Yeah. But you know, from the top down, we've led a very aggressive approach to the market, and aggressive in the sense of meeting with decision makers and really talking to the concept of the paper. When people hear about our mission and vision, there's a warmth to the paper and an acceptance of the paper. So on that basis, we then make an offer to them about our ability to differentiate ourselves in terms of the offering we make them. So for example, we would have had very different executions for game, or Peugeot did a car launch with us. So we just find very different ways to differentiate ourselves. Would we have liked more advertising? Absolutely. But we can't complain with what we've received this year. Yeah.
When you started, of course, there was the usual politicking from the established titles, labeling you and pigeonholing you and trying to say this is what you're going to do. You are going to be very much aligned to the government, etc. And have you found that a millstone in terms of trying to cultivate relationship with advertisers and also just in terms of trying to grow the newspaper?
Certainly, Godfrey, it's been one of our biggest challenges. I think the labeling and the pigeonholing of us has worked very well from a competitor point of view. We've had to spend some time undoing that connotation. But you know, the best story I tell people is that when we did a market share analysis for Q2, we received 600,000 rands worth of advertising revenue from government departments. The independent group got 6 million. So clearly we can't be
Who's supported by the government here?
Yeah, so we're growing our market share in government right now. But it has needed us to do hard yards. It's not like it was just handed to us on a platter.
Who are you targeting? And what I'm trying to get at is to get a sense of who you perceive as your main competitors. And then let's talk about who you're targeting in terms of a readership.
Well, the readership we've identified is one that I think is pro-South African. Somebody who kind of has...
Is there such a readership?
I think there certainly is, and certainly we've found that they are engaging with us on an ongoing basis through our various channels. But it's a readership who really believes in the future of South Africa, is optimistic about its future, who wants to do what it can to support that future. We kind of get away from race in terms of the audience we're targeting.
Right.
And certainly we're finding with our Times of India involvement, we're targeting a younger readership.
Does it mean that when you say you're trying to get away from race, you are saying that on both sides of the spectrum, you have this pro-South African readership?
That's correct. That's correct. And really, you know, we want to target the reader who is in South Africa to stay and wants to make it work. Right. And therefore wants to see the positives in our country. Yeah. You know, for too long, when you look at our papers, you kind of think that you're living in a different country. Because our papers reflect on South Africa very differently to the reality. You know, I often talk about when I read some of these papers and I read the crime, it kind of makes me afraid to walk in the streets. But it's a wonderful country and it's a great place to walk around in the streets.
Now, this pro-South African reader, does it criticize the government? Does it criticize the business sector?
Most certainly.
Does it criticize the hand that feeds, is what I'm trying to get at?
Most certainly, Godfrey.
How critical can you be?
Well, I think we've been very, very critical on a lot of issues. You know, we've kind of exposed some corruption within government departments. We've written about that. We've criticized President Zuma on several fronts. But I think it's part of a constructive engagement. I think the criticism is born out of a desire to see South Africa work, but to offer solutions to what's happening in this country. We certainly find that it works for us, and I think it gets great resonance out of our readers.
Is it hard work to try and maintain that balance?
I think it's very, very hard work. You know, negative stories are very easy to come by. You know, you can sit by the phone and phone the police station and get all the crime stats. To find where South Africa works is much, much harder. To go out into the rural areas where water has just been delivered and see how that's changed people's lives, that's hard work. It requires effort.
It does. It requires effort. It requires a lot of work, because when you look at it, when I read the newspapers, one of my big disappointments is the perception that unless you are critical of government, you are perceived not to be independent. And yet independence suggests independence from political and commercial interests, and being able to bring that story and tell it like it is.
That's exactly the mission we've set ourselves. But it needs us to be brave enough to put our shoulder to the wheel, to do the hard work to do it.
Yeah. Is it a difficult message to sell to the business sector particularly? I raise this because, as I say, the perception has always been that you have to be to demonstrate that you are not anti-government, but more like you are constantly reporting about government wrongdoings. If you don't do it enough, you're not independent enough.
I think it's a balance we have to find in our lives. I think government's doing a lot of things right. It's a question of finding the balance between reporting that and what government's doing wrong. I think if you set yourself the objective of finding that balance, I think you'll find resonance in the market, both business and ordinary.
Have you had a call from the government saying, hello, you guys, you're being too hard on us, you're being unfair?
I think politicians are always going to say that to you. But I think when you can find government saying you're being too critical and you can find the opposition party saying that you're being too supportive, you must be doing something right. And that's the balance we have to eat at the end of the day.
Yeah, and from the business sector?
The business sector has been quite intrigued by us, simply because we've been positioned in a particular way by our competitors. Yeah. But they've been intrigued by just the kind of mission and vision we've set for ourselves.
How fierce has that been competition? Has it been civil or has it been Glasgow?
You know, it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting.
Yeah, I'm sitting here on TV. I certainly am not in the printing space.
I think our view is that it's been tougher than it should have been. I think we believe that it's way beyond gloves off with us. I think if you do a search on Google about how newspapers have reported on New Age, no other new entrant has had the kind of focus New Age has had. In a lot of ways, we see it as a compliment. If we were ignored by the opposition, we would be irrelevant. But the fact that they're writing about us so often and so regularly must mean that we're actually doing something right.
Yeah. How much market share have you been able to take out of the established media in terms of the space you are trading in?
Well, I think, you know, it's small. I think we're still very small. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to give a percentage. Those numbers will come out at the end of the year from the independent authorities.
But perhaps anecdotal evidence that perhaps we can cite.
Anecdotal evidence, I think we've garnered some nice market share out of Telkom. I think we've garnered some very nice market share out of some of the other telecommunication companies. We've got Vodacom as an advertiser now. I think the big surprise for us was some of the car brands, the car launches that have come our way. We've got Toyota to come in. We've got Peugeot to come in. I think when we engage with retailers, it's clear to us they're taking market share from someone, because the normal response is somebody has to give if we're going to give you something. But the percentages are difficult to say. We're just very chuffed that we're starting to get some of the big brands into the paper.
I was just hoping you'd be able to give me some percentage that we can work with, and then we try and throw that forward to next year.
Well, I think, you know, I'm going to be looking to grow our revenues by 25% next year. That's the focus, and that will give us the break even.
Absolutely. We're talking to Nazeem Howa. He is the CEO of the New Age Group, and we are talking about the newspaper that's a year on today. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the current issues within the media industry. Don't go away.